Hey, what's up? I'm Evan. I'm the guy behind Will at Synthwave, and today we're gonna make some time copy stuff like this. So in this video, we're gonna make some moody, nostalgic synthwave. I wrote a song about a year ago called "Ghosts of Shibuya," and I put that on my channel. It's inspired by Timecop1983. I was originally gonna make this video more like an all-encompassing "How to Timecop 1983" video, but honestly, I came across a video here on YouTube by Synthwave Dojo. I'll link that somewhere here. I would highly recommend you go check that out because it's honestly way better than anything I could have put together. Dude's an excellent teacher and he really breaks down the specifics of all things Timecop 1983. So for this video, I'm mainly going to focus on how I produced and arranged this particular track and just give you a little bit more detail around some of the nitty gritty details around the things that really make it come together into a full song. So Timecop has all kinds of different styles in his music. He can do the romantic stuff, he can do the dark and gritty stuff, the super nostalgic stuff, kind of the futuristic cyberpunky stuff. This particular track is more inspired by some of his like darker, more moody music, and he also works a lot with other artists like Josh Daly, who sings on a lot of his tracks and plays guitar. So I really like that vibe. If you've seen some of my other videos where I like to throw in guitar, so I included some of that in this video as well. So I'm going to take you through this from start to finish. I'm going to summarize some of the key aspects along the way. Starting out, I'm going to play the first little bit here of the track, and I'll point out one of the key things I think that really makes this track stand out, at least some of them. So a little cliche, but hey, that's what synthwave is a lot of the time, right? You get a lot of these like ambient sounds, like the footsteps in the alley, uh, getting in the car, closing the door, starting the engine. It just kind of puts you right there in that alley. That kind of already paints the picture that you're in that city at nighttime. And as the sounds come in, so too does that initial bit of the track with the bass and that initial vibey arpeggio. Speaking of that initial vibey arpeggio, I've got this awesome patch I made in FreeSynth that I still use, Synth 1, and it's Total Timecop 1983. So let me take you up here and we'll solo that out just so you can feel how that kind of kicks in to start the song. Lots of reverb on that. Let's take a look at what I got. So I've got my Synth 1 patch, some EQ, get rid of those lows, cut out some of the low mids, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but big thing about this style of music too is aggressive use of the filter automation, and then some vintage verb just to set it back a bit in the mix. Timecop's usually working at slower tempos, usually like between 80 and 100, it seems to be for me. So I want to show you the bass. So I mentioned the tempos because he's usually, sometimes he'll work with the 8th note rolling bass, but a lot of times it's the 16th note rolling bass. So that pairs along with that initial arp as we go into the start of the track. And what's the one thing you hear there, right? Like, so again, that filter automation that I mentioned, it's coming in real gentle, real muted, and then eventually that filter automates up to have the cutoff more open, and you start to hear a little bit more of the higher frequencies coming through. It really just kind of sets that mood coming into the start of the track, from like low energy building up in energy as we get into that first bit of the verse. Let's go through a bit more of the track here, and then I'll point out a few other things as it starts to build up. So what do we hear there, right? We started with that bass with the frequencies cut and that initial ARP, but then a lot of other things come in. So that's another big thing with Timecop is layers on layers. Things come in, things come out. Everything's got to complement its space in the frequency spectrum. So, that's where the filtering comes in. Some things stand out more to the front. Some things are pushed more to the back. So in that 10 seconds or so that I just played you alone, you can hear a few things come in. And we also use the stereo field too, right? You could hear some of those percussive elements going from left to right ear. So there's a number of tracks that were just in that little bit that were introduced, like this good bell sound that's pretty subtle. This, I call it stab melody. So hear that on its own. So it's just a good counter melody, right? It's a counterpoint to that initial ARP that starts the track off. And then beyond that, I mentioned those percussive elements. You heard a little bit of those. Those come in from down here and some of these sound effects. But then we also have this additional bass, the biao bass. So let's hear that on its own. And you can see here, right? Again, that filter, this is what this automation is. It's just going in and out, in and out. You kind of feel that more than anything. It just creates that more dynamic movement in the track. So we're building the vibe. Let's keep going with the whole track and see how it progresses here. All right, so you heard those little guitars from the intro to this video, but I already mentioned, I like to throw in guitar to some of these tracks. Timecop will do that in some of his tracks too, when he works with other artists usually. It's real guitar. I mentioned in my first video where I made a Dance with the Dead inspired track. I just don't do like VST guitars. I just play all the guitars myself. I feel like you just got to do that to have the realism. Those guitars are up here. You just want to take a quick look at those. I'm using one of my favorites, Archetype Nolly from Neural DSP. I don't know. I just feel like that's always gives me the best rhythm tone that I can find. But aside from the guitars, you also heard those beautiful 80s toms. So I'm going to go back up here to the drum bus. This is actually using, I think I mentioned this in my last video, this DR84 plugin. I really like it. It's just super simple. It's got a couple of pre-made kits in it, and I just like the tom sounds from this, so I usually use this a lot. But again, it's just basic stuff like EQ to scoop out the mids. That really gets rid of a lot of the woofiness with tom sounds. Little bit of vintage verb on that, and also some sub filter. This is just a plugin Alliance plugin that I add on to some drum tracks to give it a little bump at the low end. That sets the tone for that that main guitar part. And another thing that we hear in there, as I was talking about, layers on layers, more of those sound elements. So let me back up a little bit here. You can hear it again. that noise sweep. Very characteristic of Synthwave and Timecop in general. So that's the type of stuff down here. Again, automation, I automate that in. I give it a gentle start, which is what we see here with this volume automation. And then it kind of reaches its peak and then it just glides into the next bit. So it's a really good transition element. Let's keep it going. And then I want to talk about a few other things as we build up to the chorus. Building. Drop. So the drums kick in there, you get that breath element, you get that cutout right up here where everything kind of just stops except for that breathing type of thing. It really creates that tension, creates that kind of impact when you hit to the chorus in the next bar. Well, another thing I wanted to point out here about this track, and just again a lot of Timecop stuff in general, is just the simplicity of the bass lines and the chord progressions. This is in C minor, so we're just alternating chords between like C, G sharp, F, and that's pretty much the backbone of the track. So really not too complicated, which is you can make really good music with pretty simplistic stuff. It's all in the arrangement. And it goes back to those layers and things coming in and out. That's what keeps the track dynamic and keeps the interest there. So one of those other things that's coming in is this additional vibey harp. So I'll play into that and then I'll solo it so you can kind of hear it. Good counter melody. Counters against that original one. All right, so when we hit that chorus, a couple more things come in. Again, we're kind of building. Right, so we go from pretty simplistic, just a couple of elements, to stacking everything, but it should all feel cohesive. So we've got a pad going here. I really like this Matrix 12 plugin from Arturia. It's got great pads, and I'm using that here. Mainly just cutting out some of the mud, as with most of these tracks. It's a big thing with these synths, especially when you stack them up. You can really build up a lot of that kind of low-end frequency, so you got to be pretty diligent with high-passing things and cutting out some of the lower frequencies. Another big Timecop thing, the brass. So let's hear that. That real Blade Runner vibe. Classic. So it's actually a patch here. I think this is a preset pack I got from Timecop for this. It's called Blade Ruiner. It's PGA8X. It's another free plugin. Great plugin. Synth 1 and this. You could do a lot of damage with both of these. They're free. But the big thing here is that kind of slower attack. That's really what gives you that vibe. So let's go a bit more. I want to point out a few other things here in this area of the track. Skip ahead just a little bit. So that it's like an Asian sound. I don't know. It's just something that I feel like I heard a lot in the 80s and that type of music. Just kind of it's got that Asian aesthetic to it. And this was a patch I kind of modified from Analog Lab, or a preset, I should say. And it's just got a really cool Just adds a cool little element to the background, little ear candy. It's beautiful. So we talked about a bunch of stuff so far. We talked about building the track up, the sound effects to set the mood, different transitional elements, the filtering a little bit, the types of chord progressions, the brass, pads, arps. So I think it's probably time we talk about the drums. Again, I told you about that Synthwave Dojo video at the start. Go check that out because he talks all about the different types of samples and exactly how to get everything set up so you get that sound. But the main things to summarize here are that, you know, he's got that really type of like boosh sound in most of his tracks, like whether it's the toms or the snare. You can hear that bit right here. If I solo out the drums, you can especially hear the snare. So it's simple stuff, right? It's essentially, it's got a little bit going on with the kick there, but it's pretty much just like a typical snare pattern, like a backbeat pattern on the 1 and the 3. So yeah, nothing too fancy. We talked a little bit about those percussive elements too, that just kind of come in here throughout the different parts of the track. So here's another little bit where that happens. Let me solo it out again. Sound effects come back in. Get a little bit of that hi-hat. It's not to love. A couple other things I want to go over here, so I'm going to skip ahead. Mainly want to talk a little bit more about the guitars, because we get into some of that more constant guitar rhythm. This is really kind of the peak of the song, in my opinion. And then we also get a guitar solo in there, because why the hell not? So let's listen to that whole bit right here. I want to talk about those guitars, but at the end there, you can hear how that just comes out of that section with just like, again, coming out the peak of the guitar, and then it just fades out with those noise sweeps and everything like that. Sets you up for the end of the song. But main thing I wanted to show here is just these rhythm guitars. Let me solo them real quick. Simple, right? I mean, simple in terms of rhythm. It's just like 2-note dyads just played in kind of a repeating motif, just like dun, 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 dun. It's kind of 80s. I mean, again, none of this is true 80s music, but it's that type of rhythm, that simple rhythm, is something in the vein of what you would hear in 80s music. And then that actually switches up over here into this part. You get just a slight alteration as the second half of the solo kicks in. Just a little bit of that higher register in the other ear. You hear that bit where it was coming down. You get like this descending synth, which is this track here. Those original arpeggios still going. And then those little bell-like elements. That's prettier than my baby the day she was born. Don't tell her I said that. Okay, let's end the track, listen to the rest, and then I'll close out with a few final thoughts. All right. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Just some arrangement notes. You could hear the energy going back down towards the end of the track there. I mean, it just kind of takes everything full circle. And then I like to end my tracks a lot of the time with something that's representative of the start of the track. So again, it kind of feels like you're completing that picture. So we bring back in those sound effects. It's really telling the end of the story. I think of it like a story. But yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I want to talk about is as I scroll through the project here, you'll have to forgive me for my crap session organization. It works for me, but it's all the automation, right? Like all of these colors, if you're kind of new to this thing, it's all automation. And really the automation is key. I think that's probably the biggest aspect of a lot of synthwave tracks, but Timecop specifically, things are always changing, even if you don't really explicitly hear it. Again, a lot of the filtering, it's making things more percussive, or it's making things more muted. The volumes coming in and out. Again, it's all about creating that energy and raising it and lowering it at different parts of the song. So that's pretty much it. If you made it this far, thanks. And glad I could do another one of these videos. I will hope to make another one like this soon. See ya.